very, very well indeed. Maitreyabandhu is a very, very good cook. So he looked at, so just in case you don't know, he's a very good cook. And he's looked after me very, very well, thank you. And Kusala has just taken me round town, so I've seen the Lamb of God. I've had some Gent noses, a Gent nose, and I've had a waffle, and I've had chips with mayonnaise. So that's it. So I'll try and speak, I tend to speak fast, and I'll try and speak slower and more clearly, because even English people don't always understand me, so I'll try my best. So I want to say a little bit more about the journey and the guide. So I think some of you, even most of you, might have been coming on the evenings where you've been exploring the journey and the guide. I've recently taught it again at the London Buddhist Centre, and I've been rethinking some of it. So I thought I'd tell you what I've been rethinking. So as you know, the first stage of the journey and the guide is integration, and then positive emotion, or kusala karma in Pali, beneficial action is sometimes translated. So what I've been thinking more recently is that those two stages, integration, let's just call it positive emotion, represent the stage of trying to live a good life, a truly good life. They represent the stage of trying to be a good person, even. A truly good person. A good man or a good woman. And I think that that's much more difficult than it sounds. To be a genuinely good person. That's what your friends need from you. That's what your family needs from you. That's what the world needs from all of us, is to be genuinely good. And when I've thought about this, I think we all know, I don't know what the Dutch is, but I think we all know what we mean by being a good person. Means being upright, honest, dependable, creative, courageous. Being a good person means, I think what you want in life, what we all want in life, is anywhere we go, whether it's to the Buddhist Centre here, or to your home where you live, or wherever you go, what you really want is people are really pleased to see you. Yeah? You want a world in which, where you go, people are genuinely pleased to see you, want to hear what you think, are quick to open up to you, are quick to feel understood by you. It's very particular, isn't it, that sense where people are really pleased to see you. I remember, a friend of mine dropping in a friend of mine by surprising him, and I was really struck by how pleased he wants to see me. Now, that's very different from people trying to be nice to you, or trying to be friendly to you, or trying to get you involved. You've probably all done that when you've got someone around and you're trying to be friendly to them, you're making an effort to be friendly to them, you try and get them involved, but you don't actually feel it very much. Possibly because you've had difficulties with them, possibly because you don't know them. But you see what I mean, that people can try and be friendly and try and be kind, but that's nothing like people being genuinely pleased to see you, for no good reason. That when you come in, they're really pleased. Clearly, most people were like that with the Buddha. They were just really pleased to see him. It was always a good that he was around. So you can only get that experience of people being genuinely pleased to see you to the degree to which you're a good person. To the degree to which you're honest, reliable, kindly, interested in them rather than just talking about yourself, gracious, grateful, all of those very old-fashioned virtues. Yeah? That's what people love you for. and you want to be loved, and you even need to be loved, you won't flourish as a person very well unless you are loved. And the only way you can do that, you can't insist on people loving you because they won't be able to do that. The only way you can get people to genuinely love you is for you to be virtuous. That's why people say that virtue is its own reward, partly. And it's very different, isn't it, than when you're trying to be friendly to someone and you're trying to go out to someone who you actually don't feel that strongly about. Yeah? So I think those first two stages are about being a truly good person. Yeah? So that the first stage, integration, is about self-knowledge, knowing who you are, and it's about taking responsibility for who you are, taking responsibility for your actions in particular. And remember that in Buddhism, your actions are your actions of your body, what you do with your body, what you do with your speech, and what you do with your mind. So when Buddhism talks about taking responsibility for your actions, it's taking responsibility for those tiny actions of thought in your mind. As well, in fact, they're crucially important, those tiny actions of thought. Also, how you speak is incredibly important. We can do incredible good with our speech and terrible harm with our speech. I've been reading quite a lot of Christian theologians recently, and I can't remember which theologian it was, talking about the damage you can do with your speech. They were likening it to like a kind of pestilence that you can do with your speech. You can create distrust and discord with your speech. And I think this has become even more important because of online, because of social media. You can now bully people online. You can opinionate online. Your speech is even more dangerous, and also potentially even can do more good. Online can do both, can't it? It can do a lot of good online, you can do a lot of harm online. And so that first stage of integration is fully taking responsibility for who you are, for your life. That's very, very difficult to do. So the way I've been thinking about just that point of responsibility is that Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of this movement, he says that we're an oxymoron, and that might be difficult, a contradiction in terms, that we're a risen ape and fallen angel. And it's a very, it's one of his aphorisms, that all of us are this kind of contradiction, living contradiction between a living ape, a risen ape, and a fallen angel. So when we're saying we need to take responsibility for our mind, it includes both of those things. That's why it's so difficult. If we were just a risen ape, we'd be happy enough with the things of an ape: sex, food, sleep, comfort, a social grouping. That we'd be happy enough with that. We'd be satisfied with that. But we're often not satisfied with that. In fact, we can be painfully unsatisfied with that. And if we were just an angel, it's more difficult to imagine, but we would, we wouldn't be interested in sex, food, sleep, and a social group. We'd just be, in this angelic state of mind. And I don't know about you, but I'm certainly not in that. But we're both. We're this strange combination. It's like we've got two sides to us. One side of us faces out into heaven, into the angelic, as it were, by which I mean that the human mind has infinite capacity. That we don't know how far the human mind can go. The image of the Buddha is saying that that's how deep the human mind can go. But we don't even know how far it can go in kind of much more mundane terms. So we've done things with the human mind now that would have been unthinkable 100 years ago. Never mind 400 years ago. The great experiment of science began with the Renaissance, we're now sending out a probe that will go beyond our solar system. That would be beyond their wildest imaginings. And there's no reason to assume that that kind of progress of the human mind won't continue. We'll be, in 200 years' time, there'll be things that we cannot imagine that we could do. So even on a literal sense, even on we don't know the capacity of the human mind. If you said to a Renaissance scientist, here's what we're going to be able to do, they think it was ridiculous, absurd. Yeah. But also we don't realise that our human mind goes all the way down to Buddhahood itself. So when we talk about being human, it includes all of that. It includes incredible depth, as yet discovered breadth, that we still don't know what we can do. So that's a positive, that's what I mean by the angelic. On the negative side, we are innate. We sort of look into our kind of primitive past. Much of us is to do with our prehistory, our genetic coding and so on. And one of the things about that, of course, is that we're capable of great evil. We're certainly capable of great stupidity. That goes without saying. But we can do terrible things, we human beings. Yeah? And anyone who's honest about themselves will see that in themselves. That they have a potential for aggression, for resentment, for all kinds of negativities, for envy. If you're honest with yourself, and Buddhism insists that you're rigorously honest with yourself, that's what you are. It's nothing to do with you personally, not that you're particularly bad. It's just that being human ranges incredibly across that scale. So Buddhism is saying we need to take responsibility for all of that. Not close our eyes and pretend that the ape doesn't exist, but not also just bury ourselves in the ape and pretend the angel doesn't exist. We need to somehow take responsibility for all of that. It's very, very difficult to do because we have a very strong instinct to blame. It's very difficult to say to oneself, this was my fault, this is my mental state, this is my aggression, this is my anxiety, this is my meanness. We want to almost instinctively say it's caused from someone outside us. They made me anxious, this person is oppressing me, and so on. Buddhism's really very unforgiving in this way. Recently I went to Dublin to visit the Dublin Buddhist Centre, and I was late for the train, for the check-in. And I was in a sort of dreamy, I write poems and they're very bad for you. They sort of rock your brain, because they start getting you in this kind of floaty place. And then I was on the train looking at my watch thinking, so the check-in closes at 2:10. It's now 2:45, and I'm still on the train. And suddenly realising that I'd nowhere near left enough time. I've been in this dreamy kind of state, as I can easily do. And nowhere left enough time. And what I noticed is immediately I realised that, I started blaming. So I started thinking, this is supposed to be the Gatwick Express. That's the name of the train. And it seemed to me to be going very slowly and stopping a lot. So I was complaining in my mind about, they call it the Gatwick Express, they ask more money for it and it's going really slowly. Then I got to the airport and I was thinking, look how long these queues are, why aren't they dealing with that? That person over there needs to come and, why don't they do things? Immediately, even in that small example, I was wanting to blame someone. A very difficult thing to keep coming back to, you have not left enough time. This is your fault. You have not left enough time, you've not thought about it clearly. That's what I mean by taking responsibility for one's mind. Very, very difficult to do. It's easy to say, very difficult to do. Even for me, who've been practicing for a long time, I still am trying to take responsibility for my mind. a while ago I was with my partner's daughter, who's, well, she's nearly 12 now, but I remember carrying her when she was, I don't know, 6 or something like that. You know, and I'm completely in love with my partner's daughter. She's just happy with both of them. And I was carrying her, and somebody nearly knocked into us. And what shocked me was the immediate aggression I felt. I felt like a wolf. I would have, you know, bitten them. The protective instinct I felt towards this child really shocked me, the violent potential in it. I would do anything to protect this child. I mean, actually, there was no danger at all, but I felt this incredible sense of do not get near this child. You know, I almost showed my teeth, you know, to this person. So we don't realise sometimes how much aggression we have in us, how much lust we have in us, how much, everything, you know it, you know what they are. Vengeance, I think, is much more common than we realise. We might not call it that, but we can have vengeful thoughts quite easily. And that's not because you've got something wrong with you, or you've got something psychologically, that's not a psychological issue you've got. It's just that you're a human being. Yeah. So integration, I think, this is how I've been thinking about it now. It's about really taking on that this is my life. That aggression is my aggression. That being late was because it was my fault. Yeah? Taking full ownership of your life. If you look at anyone who makes a loss of their life, and some people do, but many of us don't, that's the great tragedy of life, is we don't make enough of it. We don't give ourselves to it enough. If you see people who do make a lot of their life, what you see is people who take responsibility for their life. So that's integration, is about taking full responsibility for your mind, for your actions, for your thoughts. One Christian theologian says that you should never entertain a thought that you wouldn't entertain on your deathbed, which is impossible to do. But I was really struck by that. You couldn't possibly do that. But I was struck by that because what it shows you is that your thoughts are very, very important. We tend to think that they're not that important. But all of your life is coming from little thoughts you've had. You know, and it can become, those little thoughts in one person can become an epidemic. I've often been struck by in Europe, the long history of hatred of Jewish people, for instance. A kind of epidemic you see all the way through European history, really since St. Francis was teaching. And you know, someone must have said Jewish people poison the wells. Somebody must have said that one time, or thought that. And then it became one of those myths that just poisons people's minds against people. So your thoughts are very, very important. So that if the first stage, integration, is about taking full responsibility for yourself, which is a tough thing to ask of somebody. I think we're probably almost wired to blame others, to feel a victim of others, to find someone who you think is causing your unhappiness. Very, very difficult not to do that. But then Buddhism would say, so you then move into positive emotion. The simple way of putting that now, I think, is that your actions matter. That's what really Buddhism is saying by kusala karma, is your actions matter. They matter much, much more than you think. In fact, in a sense, they're the only thing that does matter. What you think, what you say, and what you do really matters. On the basis of what you think and what you say and what you do, your life can flourish unbelievably, much more than you imagine. And on the basis of what you think, what you say and what you do, you can destroy your life. Your actions are the key to your life. And those tiny actions of your mind, those tiny actions of what you do, and of course what you don't do, matters a huge amount. What you forget to do, what you fail to do. they've done research with old elderly people and they're asking about what they regret most. Most people don't regret things they've done, they regret things they didn't do. So when we say, oh, your actions matter, your non-actions matter. Yeah? And that's a great responsibility to bear, that every action of mind, speech and body, and every non-action of those things is constantly creating us. I mean, that's what the law of karma is saying, that we're constantly recreating ourselves. And we can be recreating ourselves towards the Buddha, as it were, or we can be recreating ourselves in more and more negative ways. Our mind is like a spell. We cast a spell on ourselves, and we're under a spell through society. So I think what Buddhism is really trying to say in positive emotion or kusala karma is your actions really matter. Your actions have even sort of cosmic significance. There's been a lot of denigration of what it means to be human, that your actions don't, if you think that, if you're a nihilist, you think that your actions don't matter. You think that nothing matters. It's an incredibly damaging view, to think that your actions don't matter. You will, it's a very, very unhealthy place to be. So Buddhism is saying that your actions matter, and they matter more than you realise. They don't just matter for you psychologically, they don't just matter for others socially. They have, and I can't prove this, but they have, they're real. They have real effects, as it were, in the universe. That they matter in a much grander scope than we realise. That is what I'm coming to think anyway. That, and that's possibly what I mean by a risen, a fallen angel, is that our thoughts, our actions ramify, poetically into heaven. They form the world. They're much more than we think. So those are the first two stages of the path. And then you've got spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, which I see as being two sides of the same coin. So when you're ordained, I was ordained, what's the date today? 6th of June. So I was publicly ordained 28 years ago, the day after tomorrow. It'll be my order birthday. I was privately ordained on the 4th of June, which is the day after my birthday. And when I got ordained, I was given my name and given a kesa, and I was given what's called a sadhana practice, where you visualise the Buddha figure, basically. And that image represents, the image you meditate on the Buddha or one of the Bodhisattvas, represents reality, how reality appears. And it represents a new kind of consciousness, not just a new, because consciousness suggests a mind state, but a new way of being in the world, which looks like looks like the Buddha. Except for in sadhana you imagine them as glowing with colour and light and so on. So Arthur Kusala and I went to see the Lamb of God this afternoon in the cathedral. One of the reasons I wanted to come to Ghent was to see the Lamb of God, because when I'd been to Ghent only once before, when I was at art college, and we did an art college trip, and we came to see the Lamb of God. And I remember in those days they used to only open the painting twice a day. You had to be there at a particular time, and that was when they opened it. I was only 22 or something like that, before I became a Buddhist. But I remember them opening it and feeling, I don't know, what can you say, just incredible image. Just looking at it again today, it's actually even better than I remember it. But it's this incredible image. But you see how I mean, I don't believe in God, and I don't believe in the soul. I don't believe that the Virgin Mary was assumed into heaven and sat on the right hand of Jesus, etc. I don't believe any of that. I find it, I just don't, I can't take it seriously in a certain sense of theology. But the image, if you just look at the image, it's a wonderful image for a new kind of consciousness. You have to look at it shorn of its negative, the negative effects of some of the theology. But what you've got is a painting of glory, haven't you? The whole thing is a painting of glory. I mean, there is the crucifix as always, because it's so central to the Christian genre, but it's quite far back and held by an angel, and the post that he was beaten on is held by another angel, and I'd imagine another angel holds the nails. That's what usually happens. But that's all quite discreetly in the background. What you've mostly got is an image of glory. So you've got the dove of the Holy Ghost at the top, and the rays of gold going into all the people. You've got sumptuous colour. So if you read it poetically, what you've got is an image of glory, and that image is to do with colour. It's to do with beauty. The painter, Van Eyck, has made it as beautiful as possible. It's interesting, I was struck by the fact there's always a book. I mean, Mary, the Mother of God, she's reading a book. John the Baptist is reading a book. There's always the book. Now, of course, it's the Word, but also, I think, metaphorically, that means that there's a learning element of. So, if you think of this image of glory as a new kind of consciousness, that is saying that new kind of consciousness is beautiful. Primarily, that's what you first see. It's also intelligent, because it's the book. It's intelligible. It's not a fantasy. It has the book, so it's something that you read. So Manjughosha holds a book, effectively. The Bodhisattva of wisdom carries a book. In other words, it's not just your heart is opening to beauty, but your mind is opening to the deepest possible thought. Also, the image, there's lots of jewels in the painting, and there's lots of flowers. So it's a flower-adorned, jewel-adorned consciousness that they're bodying forth. A coloured, flower-adorned, jewel-adorned consciousness that has got rays of gold. Actually, that's a beautiful image for me of the new consciousness that you're trying to discover through Buddhist practice. Intelligent, beautiful, valuable. The word valuable is to do with value. Value is always to do with treasure, to do with, the metaphor is always jewels. So the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas very often wear jewels, and that's because they show on their bodies what's inside their heart, which is a jewel-adorned, flower-adorned consciousness. If you look at it metaphorically, without kind of Christian theology, it's all there. What's more is that the image includes the natural world, so there are all these rocks and beautiful trees, and then on the right-hand panel there are these doves flying in the air, birds, and then all the figures on horses. So you've got the natural world, you've got the inorganic world of rocks, you've got the world of botany and so on, flowers and trees and so on. So what that's saying is that this consciousness that you can discover, human beings, and the reason I like using another image rather than the Buddhist image, partly it's here, but what that's saying is that there's a possibility of a consciousness which is all, that takes in all of that, which includes the angel and the devil, which includes the risen ape and the fallen angel, which is both flower-adorned and jewel-adorned, but doesn't denigrate the animal in us, includes that, goes beyond that, but includes it. So what Buddhism would say is that to experience and to live from that new consciousness, first of all you need to take responsibility for your mind. And that's a hard ask. You need to be really courageous and really honest with yourself to do that. You need to admit, I need to admit, that that was my fault, that I was to blame, that I've got these feelings that I don't like in myself, but there they are. Yeah? Then you need to cultivate the good by your actions. You need to love other people by your actions. You need to, through body, speech and mind, cultivate the good so that you become someone who, when you enter a room, everyone is intrinsically pleased to see you. Because they trust you, because they love you, because they want you around. Yeah? And then on the basis of that very healthy self, which is taking full ownership of yourself, on the basis of that self-ownership, on the basis of being genuinely good, not pretending to be good, and definitely not pretending to be nice, but being genuinely good, very, very hard to do, you then have to let go of your sense of yourself. You then have to die. You have to see that however good you become, you never enter that new consciousness. You can never enter that consciousness that's painted by the Van Eycks. You have to die to enter that. You have to let go of all kind of egotism. You have to see through that, is a better way of putting it. I remember talking to Bhante Sangharajta about this when I first went to Florence. I actually became quite, starting to sound very Christian, this talk. I became very inspired by these crucifixion, paintings of the crucifixion by Fra Angelico, the Italian painter. And I said, I wonder if you could use an image of the crucifixion for spiritual death. Bhante said, no, you couldn't. And he said, because in that image, you sacrifice the self. Yeah? That's what the image of, I think that was a very, very dangerous image, this idea of self-sacrifice. You sacrifice yourself to go to heaven. He said, in Buddhism, you see through the self. You see that there isn't anything to sacrifice. You see that your ideas of yourself are a construction which you don't need to be weighed down by anymore. So you see through the self. When you see through the self, you experience a new consciousness, which one way of painting it would be to say it's jewel adorned, flower adorned, it has the book, it has colour, you become a source of good for the world. And that's what we really want, is that new consciousness. To get to that new consciousness, we need to take responsibility for ourselves, difficult though that is. We need to face up to ourselves, especially the darker parts of ourselves. We need to be able to, and we need to have friends around us who we can be quite candid with about those signs, who we can be ourselves with. We can't grow if we don't have friends. Then we need to, particularly I think, be generous and courageous in positive emotion. People get very worried about ethics because they think it's about what you shouldn't do, and it always comes to do about sex in the end of the day. But actually, which you think, well, whatever, actually what's most important is that you're generous. Actually, people worry also about, I've flown here, should I fly here, and there's lots to be said about that kind of ethics, and I don't want to denigrate it, but I think sometimes people get too caught up in that, and they'd be better off just thinking, how could I be more generous? From a Buddhist point of view, being generous is absolutely crucial, and a much more important matter than, sex and all that other stuff. The important thing is to be generous. So let's just say that for positive emotion, just try to be as generous as possible. And then you need to die. You need to commit yourself to a spiritual ideal. That's what being ordained means, committing yourself to a spiritual ideal, which asks everything of you so that you die into that ideal. And then to the degree to which you die, a whole new consciousness is reborn. And it's a bit like the Lamb of God in your cathedral. You said half an hour?
That's fine. Yeah, sounds good.